Hey 3D MJers, this is Andrea Valdez and you're listening to the 3D Muscle Journey podcast. Today I am talking to Alberto Nunez and Eric Helms about how most of you should not be copying bodybuilders. Now I get it, this is primarily known as a bodybuilding and powerlifting podcast, but believe it or not, most of our following is made up of people who have never competed before, and we get a whole lot of feedback and questions from that population all the time. And while that's the obvious audience who will benefit from this show, we also think there are a ton of off-season competitors who need to hear this information too. The waiting period between diets is where a lot of competitors have the most trouble, and we want to offer some solutions and ideas for people who are struggling to maintain either their body weight or their sanity or both in the meantime. So, in this show, you'll hear us talk mainly about how the culture of competitive bodybuilding has helped, but also seriously hindered many people's ideas of what it takes to have the look and lifestyle that will make them happiest in the long run. We also discuss the rise of body dysmorphia in males over the past decade, the weird badges of honor we've made up surrounding intuitive eating, carbohydrate intake, and lack of cardio, the ongoing issues of bodybuilding personal trainers who forget that their clients are not bodybuilders, the dangers and missed opportunities that come from too narrow of a focus within any single sport, and a whole lot more. So as always, if you have any feedback or comments on this episode, go to 3dmusclejourney.com or to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/team3dmj and leave it under podcast number 99. Please enjoy our episode titled Don't Copy Bodybuilders with pro natural bodybuilders Alberto Nunez and Eric Helms.
All right, so it's actually not a surprise to us, I feel, but often we'll get messages of appreciation from our people who tune in and keep up with just about everything we do, but they'll always excuse themselves because they're like, I don't compete in anything, but I get so much from what you guys put out there, and I guess this is what this podcast is about. This is for you guys. This is to kind of throw some ideas at you guys that are probably, because I feel sometimes when we go into our deep into the bodybuilding jargon, it's or what bodybuilders have to do to maximize what they're trying to maximize. They wonder if this applies to them and if they should be doing this. So I think we're going to try to weed out a few things that are not necessarily the highest priorities to those of you who just kind of want to do this bodybuilding thing, but not to those extremes where, you emaciate yourself every few years, basically. So this is for you guys.
Yeah, and also I think it would help a lot of off-season bodybuilders who tend to not be happy unless they are prepping. And I've been one of them a few times.
Yes.
Yeah, so it's like when you get that message, Bert, and it says, hey, I'm not a bodybuilder, but I get so much from you guys. Sometimes I see that message and I go, maybe you should be getting a little less from us.
Yeah.
For example, what should they not get something of? What's a common thing that you find general population lifters decide to adopt? And you're like, please don't do that.
I think some of the cyclical stuff that bodybuilders do, I think, are products of the sport and products of trying to push muscularity to a level that your body really doesn't want to. And the sacrifice that comes with that is typically having a good relationship with food that is the exact opposite thing you want to engender in your gym pop. So the idea of I'm going to go on a 6-month bulk and then I'm going to do a 6-week mini cut. If you're just someone who wants to look good and be healthy and lift weights and get strong, I think that's probably a pretty bad idea. I don't know that you need to have a dedicated, bulking or cutting phase unless you're starting off super skinny and lean, or you are starting off overweight, and then it wouldn't be a bad idea to start with a bulk or a cut, and then primarily just move over to something more long-term and sustainable.
Damn it, I have so many follow-ups to that.
Well, the podcast is finished, and unfortunately we can't. So.
I know, but like, I'm gonna try to, shit. Okay, small thing number one would be the first argument. What if I want to? Like when you say the cyclical thing is not very productive for someone who just wants to live their life or whatever. But what if I don't want to compete, but I want to look better than average? Should like when someone say, well, shouldn't I be doing the bulks and the cuts because that's what's going to get me looking awesome every summer, or that's what's going to
mess up your relationship with food and have you hating yourself, except for the summers. I would agree. Yeah, I think people just underestimate at what cost that comes, and how many bodybuilders, like you were talking about, Andrea, really struggle in the off season because the only way they really know how to have a body they like is through the process of prep. And then they feel like handcuffed to the sport. Like the off season is just this waiting game where I'm unhappy with my body fat climbs. I try to convince myself I have to do that. I try to convince myself to focus on my gym performance. But in reality, I am wishing I could diet again, but also dreading the diet because it was so hard last time. Oh my God, I'm trapped. I hate myself. Kind of thing.
Yeah, that's basically exactly where I was a couple times. And I'll elaborate on even more of those thoughts and feels too. Like you hit them on the head. Yeah, I know based on my education and my coaching and all that stuff, I know that if I'm not competing, I should be at a healthy body weight, not one that I enjoy looking like, but a healthy one, right? So therefore, I'm a bad athlete if I still like how I look because I know I don't have a lot of muscle yet, or you know what I mean? Like it wasn't. It was less about, it's okay if it's about that. Like, oh, I want to look good at the pool. It was less that and more like, nah, champions don't care how they look. They do what they need to do, and I don't have a lot of muscle yet, so I should just do things that are totally there. And that's such a mind fuck because, again, not happy, wasn't happy.
Yep.
Felt slow, and I don't know.
I had a light bulb moment while you were talking of how to express something. I think because in our culture, in fact in most cultures, I think we think that physical changes, sure, they happen slow. You have to train hard to do that. Hashtag Rocky montage. But the mental changes, it's just a decision, right? You just need to adopt this new mindset. Like you're expressing your experience as a early stage physique competitor that, champions don't have this mindset. But I think what we need to acknowledge is that it takes years to develop a champion mindset.
That I wasn't a champion. That's first off.
Well, absolutely.
Yeah.
Or that even champions have to work towards having a champion mindset. Like it can take a bodybuilder a decade to get to the point where they're actually truly comfortable with what they need to do in the off season. And it's not just like a switch you flip. Like learning how to not track macros in the off season, learning how to not use competition prep as a vehicle for your happiness, learning how to look at your physique as hitting a 90-mile-per-hour fastball versus, getting judgment from judges and having that affect your self-worth. That doesn't happen overnight, and that can take years. I think just that needs to be acknowledged. Like that doesn't happen quickly. It's not just a mindset you adopt. That's an emotional change and an outlook that you have to cultivate over years.
Yeah, I guess we've talked about this on the podcast before, like the real shitty part of that is the same habits then that I'm talking about in this period, the same food and the same effort that goes into my food. Actually, I probably put in more effort watching my food then, and just as much effort in the gym, different effort. More unhappy than I am now with less emotional and even physical effort into my food, but just because my build finally caught up. I don't feel like my mindset was weak then. I feel like I don't need it to be as hard because after years of lifting, I halfway look like I lift now. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
I think they happen at the same time. You have to do the physical investment to build a physique while you're also doing the mental investment to have a behavior set that means you can sustain it. Like each of us has found a pretty good equilibrium in the off season, quote unquote. But that came through a lot of investing on the front end. Like anyone who's read the reverse diet series that Berto has shared, just to kind of get an insight into how much he struggled, or anyone who's heard me talk about my first couple of years in the sport where I struggled to not gain, 20 pounds on top of where I started the prep after my first prep, and then finding equilibrium, and how that only happened from me moving to another country and taking now what's been 7 years off of competing. I found that. So I think, and then your own personal process through shifting to focusing on performance and versus physique sport to get you better at physique sport. I think those are all things that have to happen concurrently.
Yeah. I guess what it makes me think about this might be off topic but might not. When you talk about the champion's mind, have you read a book or heard of a book called You Are the Placebo?
I have not.
Okay. It's outrageous. But I definitely can't sum it up. But a thing that I think about a lot more now as we are, I guess I'll just drop the ball here. We're opening our roster up to a long-term off-season and Gen Pop mode of coaching, right? So if you haven't visited the website lately, little pluggy plug, 3dmuscletrain.com/coaching. We now have ongoing coaching services for off-season and Gen Pop too. And so I think about this a lot more lately, and I've been more interested in it lately, like how if someone never wants to compete, so we're not just pulling them out of this damaged area that we've just talked about a lot, but like I don't really ever want to get to a place so dark that I hate my body, but I'd like to just continue improving it. And does that mean I have to get fat to get the muscle? Like I just said I had to do or whatever, right? Or like hate myself first. And like you said, the upfront investment. But the reason I brought that book up is because it's sort of about how your mind can affect your body, right? And the way you feel about something and its effectiveness. And so what I'm bringing this conversation back to is I know that when you say I've focused on performance, it did bring me to this place emotionally where I settled, but it brought me to a place when I really think about it where I actually did, for the first 6 months of focusing on performance, get bigger, but I just didn't care because I was having fun. And I was in a place where I was socially allowed to train 4 hours a day and socially allowed to go out now and eat my friends. And it didn't really matter because I was training my ass off. And so I guess the long end of that conversation is if someone really enjoys busting their ass and that allows them to also not be so crazy with their food, should they do that versus someone who needs to learn that zeroed-in mindset, who needs to go through a prep and not eat a lot and be very monitored with activity? I don't know if that was a question, but can you help me out with that, Eric? Like elevated intake and activity, and if that makes you happier, would that be better than restricting and calculating both, even if we ended up with the same physique for different people?
Yeah. I'll talk to you as a good example of what often happens. Like sometimes I'll inherit a physique competitor, more often women, just because I think of the culture of fitness they come from than men, who is like, hey, I really love training, but I miss getting sweaty, breathing hard, and feeling like I got a hard workout. And because I used to do all kinds of like Metcons, high rep stuff, circuits, and no rest periods, this upper lower split that you've got me that's focusing on, progressive overload and the big lifts and then getting some volume in on the small lifts is really not doing that for me. I would tell a physique competitor, hey, we can make a few compromises, but I really don't think we should sacrifice the loads you can use and the tension you can supply in your recovery just so you can feel more sweaty. Like, do you want to get on stage and compete? That would be the conversation I would have with someone who wants to compete in figure but came from a more general fitness background. However, someone who just wants to look good, feel happy, and have a good relationship with activity and food, I would be like, we can absolutely compromise on that. And I think that's something that a lot of our listeners may not realize. Like, if you want to do a day or two of bodybuilding, but then do like 3 or 4 CrossFit WODs a week, there's nothing wrong with that. Or do like boot camps, or spin classes, or body pump, or whatever. I think you don't have to make sacrifices to scrape for the last 5% like we would with someone who's literally going to stand on stage and be judged, and who's put 6 months of dieting investment and 3+ years of off-season investment into a single competition. So I think that's the big one. Like, we talk about optimizing performance for bodybuilders, but that's not even the same conversation you'd have with someone. So exactly, if you have someone who just really loves being active and loves to move, they should be moving more than might be optimal for hypertrophy, because it's going to result in better outcomes more globally.
So this is when I get general pop people, like, quite often the first thing we go over, or that I notice anyways, is that it's like, you should be having way more fun with this, because there's certain things that I make compromises with for that bottom line. I wish I could just, it's really nice outside today, like, just go out for a run or something, or, go play basketball and then play in a pickup basketball game. But like, I'm always worried about things like, hey, what if I roll an ankle, my knee, things like that. So I think that's one thing, like, that, like, we talked about adding more physical activity, but sometimes it's like, hey, you don't have to be doing all this and like trying to balance all these things that you feel are going to get you to your goals. Like, you can take a much more chill route and absolutely make having fun a big part of your programming. So that's if I were to retire from bodybuilding today, that'd probably be the first thing that would change. Would be like, shoot, like, I can go hike 10 miles and not worry as much as I do now about where that falls within like my training. So yeah, I think that for you general pop people, it's like, hey, like, make sure like fun is a huge component of the decisions you make within your strategy.
Yeah, and beforehand we were talking about one of my big pain points, because I am the girl that Eric's talking about that was like, I just want to get sweaty, but like, I'm not supposed to, because games.
Hey, remember I took your intervals away? Your intervals away? And when yeah. Right. So when you were prepping, it's like, you can't move like that, please.
Yeah. And then he tried to meet me halfway and let me run. And we talked about this in the last podcast. Y'all weren't on it. And then I did it like 3 times. And I was like, nope. In the middle of prep. It hurts. But I do think more and more that there is something to be said for the fun component. And it's funny how we've talked a lot of times on this podcast about like people saying they want shit but not going there, right? And it's funny and we think that the sacrifice is counting your calories, and the sacrifice is making time to warm up your squats bowl so you don't bust your shit up, and the sacrifice is getting going back to the gym at 9 p.m. to do your cardio or whatever, right? And then I think what we've missed talking about would be the flip side, where you just said, Bert, where the sacrifices you make are you don't get to do more. And the sacrifices that I used to make a lot were you shouldn't get too sweaty. It's bad for your knees if you want to do the elliptical hard intervals or the stair stepper when I kind of think it's fun. And I think as people who are bodybuilding coaches, and I think everyone who listens to, or not everyone, most people who listen to this are powerlifting, bodybuilding specific, but there's so much to learn from personal trainers, NSCA, AS, like we make fun of that, or I always used to make fun of like the ACSM recommendation, especially for food intake, because we're like, how are you going to get the gains on that? But it's like, there's a lot of things that we can learn from other sports and from people themselves. It's like we forget what we like because we like learn within ourselves. That makes sense. Like we've decided bodybuilding is what I should pay attention to because I want to look this way even if I don't want to compete. So I look at what Eric Helms is saying, I look at what Mike Israel is saying, I look at and I feed into this natural bodybuilding thing because they look really great and I want to look great. But you forget that like you probably looked great in high school when you were playing basketball, and there's a lot of people in the Olympics that look great. They don't give a shit about this. You probably enjoyed lots of types of physical activity that aren't lifting that might make you look better. We just forget.
Yeah. I think you're hitting on kind of some of the cultural emphasis that we place as bodybuilders and how that should be taken in a healthy dose, but shouldn't be swallowing the whole packet of pills if you're not a bodybuilder. So I'll give you an example of what the hell I mean by that. Yeah. We glorify pushing yourself way past your comfort zone and doing things you absolutely don't want to do to achieve something because it makes it that much sweeter. Like, I put in 6 months of work after 5 years of training to get on stage, and there's only 60 people in the audience, and it didn't matter what I placed because I looked better. I did it for me. Like, yes, like that's like the cultural juice that binds bodybuilders together. Yeah. Like, no one else gets that. Yeah. And I think small doses of that, very, very good if you're Gen Pop. Like, I did that set of 15 on squats, and I got a little nauseous, and it was freaking hard, and I know I can do it. Or, I went through, this little cleanup phase after a couple years of just being, gaining, and I was able to, have a good relationship with my diet. I dropped 10 pounds. That was all good, and then I maintained it. That was awesome. Building that self-efficacy, proving to yourself what you can do, all those things are fantastic, and they're a huge benefit to, following a kind of fitness, physical culture, nutrition-focused lifestyle. But definitely don't buy into or take a big dosage of it's all about the grind and the sacrifice. And, there should be some point 5 months into your diet where you want to give up everything, quit your job, and never lift again. But then the next morning you talked yourself into it and you did your cardio. You took your BCA and your Himby and you did it anyway. Like, that should not be part of your life, even though that's the type of thing that Berto and I will read and be like, fuck yeah, I get it. You get it, boy.
Hey, Eric, thanks for wrapping up my rambles in something that applies to the conversation. I like when you do that.
That's the way we click like that. You give me.
I'm like, Berto said this. I'm gonna go on for 10 minutes and then fucking forget what he just said, and then Eric's gonna be like, what she meant was.
See, that's where the triumvirate. The triumvirate.
Okay, Bert, say something.
See, there's some people out there that I guess they're like, well, I'm like general pop level 2, where they do kind of sort of want to maximize things, but they don't want to do that last crazy thing where you jump into a prep. And I think some of them might be wondering, but like, hold up, like I don't want to do, I don't want to sprint because I really want to like maximize like muscle gain and strength gain, but like in a much more chill environment than the way you guys do. So I guess. And to be honest, I think that is the majority of our people. Like, I don't think we have too many folks that, like, they just kind of want to look all right. And, they want to, like, building muscles, like, 4th on their list. I think a lot of our people, like, it's like, looking right and being very muscular and kind of almost looking like Matt Ogus, but not really. Like, that is kind of what they're aiming for. And I guess, like, one thing that I would tell those folks is that often a lot of the errors that bodybuilders make is because they try to take on way too much way too soon. And they're always kind of like redlining themselves. And like just me personally, like I'll get into phases where I don't care about my training as much or my bodybuilding. It won't last very long. It's like a 2-3 month thing. Or like for me, I feel cruisy. And I end up making some of the best progress because I get out of my own way. And I'm just kind of like doing the things that matter. And if I do something that kind of is conflicting to my goals, like, well, they just happen less frequently because I feel like I'm in the environment is just way more chill. you know? So I'd say to those people is like, that's the one thing you have going for you, is that you are less likely to make errors because you're not trying to work so damn fast all the time. Whereas a bodybuilder is like, okay, 2-year off season, I need to look, this much better next time I compete. And designing your program and working within that program in that sort of environment, like that's where they get in their own way. They might push too hard when something's hurting and then it turns into something bigger. Whereas like with these peeps, it's like, hey, you have that where there's no deadline, I guess. There really isn't a deadline.
Yeah, that's a really good freaking point. Is because when I hear Gen Pop, like when we say it, there's like we're not talking about the person that is getting trained at 24-hour fitness, who does a few leg extensions in a boot camp. Like maybe we should specify. And I'm glad you did, Berto, that it's like there's an athlete who's not competing, and I think that's a real thing. The longer that I'm in this whole, like the older I get, the more I realize that is a thing. Like you can be an athlete who just isn't competing right now. So I think, like you said, most of the people that listen to this I think the problem lies with non-competitive bodybuilders or just off-season bodybuilders have all these same problems, right? Like you were saying, Eric, it's like they're either dieting or they've lost their shit and they hate the way they look and they're not having a good time and they just want to diet again because it eases the social and emotional discomfort.
Yeah. I think there's probably a lot of people who up to this point were kind of feeling misrepresented. Like, look, I'm not going to be doing boot camp classes and I don't want to get on stage, but literally the entire reason I step into the gym is to get as muscular as possible, and I want to walk around in the best shape I can, and that's a huge goal of my life. I just don't want to put on dream tan. So I do want to do what's optimal. You're not representing me well. So I think we do acknowledge that's a huge portion of our audience. The problem is that all you folks who that is your goal, you look to people who don't know how to do the main thing you need to learn. So bodybuilders in general don't know how to do maintenance. They don't know how to walk around and maintain a good physique. And they specifically shouldn't do that because it's actually counterproductive to their goals. They have to diet down to 4% body fat if they're a male, or 8 to 10% body fat if they're a female. And then they have to try to make improvements in a time-restricted phase to get on stage again. So they're probably going to get a little heavier than you would want to look. And then they primarily only post pictures of themselves when they're in great shape. So not only do they give you an unrealistic idea of what you can maintain and walk around with, they don't give you any skills of how to actually do that. They just give you cyclical diets, cyclical bulking phases. And I think that is absolutely anathema to what you should be doing. I think it's a process. Thank you. Scrabble for the win. Yeah. I think really what if you're someone who wants to maximize your physique and spend as much of your life in great shape as possible, you need to look at the sum of the whole versus the small parts. And while bodybuilders do need to kind of look at those small little pieces. So if gaining at 5% slower rate of muscle mass while being in a more of like kind of a gaintaining phase versus going through cuts and bulks is actually better for you, because you might actually learn how to sustain the physique you achieve once you get there for a larger part of your life. But if you spent 15 years building your physique through bulks and then cutting down every time, you're going to have to spend another 15 years figuring out how the hell do I maintain that, which I think is shitty, because that means you're actually not spending much time achieving your goal of being able to walk around and go to the beach, take off your shirt, and everyone being like, hey, bro, like, what's your secret? And you're going to be like, well, bananas. So, yeah.
That's the secret everyone knows. We just told you we can end the podcast now.
Yep.
Answer,
change the
bananas.
title of this to Don't Copy Bodybuilders to The Secret is Bananas.
But I do think that everyone, I'm like my family members, and I think like a couple girls I went to high school with or whatever will contact me or DM or whatever and be like, hey, I know that you work with bodybuilders. I don't want to be a bodybuilder, but I want to. And they don't look like, they're not obese, but this is the lines are something like this. And I have people on my roster like this, where it is, I don't want to hate the way I look. I don't want my life to be run by food. How do I do that? And I like some shape or whatever, because it's a girl usually, right? So, is that a male thing too, or am I being crazy? Most people that come to me with that request are female, but I also like, are dudes unhappy with themselves a lot of the time in the off season, just as much?
No. Yeah, they're just as males, you said?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, yeah, absolutely. And we've talked about this before, but it's kind of a new thing because the way Eric and I were raised is like you just get kind of, everyone would get kind of fat, and like that's just how he's spoken.
Oh,
it was
like
okay,
bodybuilding
you know?
race.
It was socially acceptable in fitness.
Yeah.
Even if you weren't a competitive
socials.
bodybuilder. Well, we did different socials, you know?
They weren't
and
visual.
I think now, thanks to the quote-unquote aesthetic revolution, we also get to share in the eating disorders and disordered body image. So hashtag equal opportunity. Thank you, aesthetic gods who have used your YouTube and Instagram platforms to fuck us all up.
To make us all feel terrible about ourselves.
Yes, now we all can feel the pain of women. It's great. So.
3DMJ prides itself on keeping this show, our blog, and our YouTube channel as free and relevant sources of information for our community week after week. We also release additional free video courses as often as possible at 3dmjvault.com. If you'd like to help support our mission and our work, please consider becoming a monthly patron of our endeavors. Go to patreon.com/team3dmj and donate as little as $1 per month to our cause of helping educate and grow the drug-free bodybuilding and powerlifting communities worldwide. You can definitely choose to donate more, and if you do so, we'll send you discount codes for future use on any of our paid products. But any little bit helps, and we appreciate your monthly support in any amount that you see fit. So again, you can start assisting the team at patreon.com/team3dmj. That's patreon.com/team3dmj. To make it all about me again, right? Because it's easier to throw myself under the bus as a fucked up female than like someone else, anyone else. Is like, for example, my fucked up state end of 2013 that we talked about a couple times already in this show. If I didn't want to compete again, how could I or should I have handled that differently? When as a competitor, it's like, no, you need this, wait it out. You won't hate this when you put more muscle on. It's okay. Okay, I realized that was actually, as an athlete, that is a part of, as a physique athlete, that was smart. And I did it, and I didn't like it, but it was smart. But say I didn't want to hate myself any longer, and I wanted to enjoy my life again. And if we're coaching me, right, actually we could say this, Bert, you were my coach then, but let's say that I didn't want to compete again, how would you have treated me differently?
Yeah. I think I would have told you, let's focus on all the things that you've picked up from this culture that you enjoy. Mm-hmm. And the things that are conducive to it that you don't get to do as much of, let's start to include those in there.
Yeah.
So I think that'd be a good start, and I think that would have put you in a pretty good place. You would have still gotten your lift on. You know, you would have had a few days that were, you know, specifically to build the muscle, and you would have done your other things, and you would have eaten your protein, you would have eaten your meals, and yeah, a lot of the things that I banned you from doing, I think that would have been a huge one for you specifically. Yeah. That would have really, yeah, you would have, especially with the come down from a prep, I think what would have happened is like now you have this other thing that, holy crap, I haven't experienced happiness from this in a while.
Yeah.
So that would have been your situation.
I think stepping away from competition also eliminates a lot of the urgency. So much of the issues I run into are people who are like, yeah, the main critique I had, I was not big enough. So I need to get big, and I want to get back on stage in 2 years. So all of a sudden it's, fuck, I got 2 years to get jacked.
You know what's great is that's exactly what I told Bert. What are we going to do between now and 2015? Because 2015 I want to go again. I know I can't do 2014, but in 2015.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's like most of the pitfalls that bodybuilders fall into. Why did you train when you were injured? Well, because I was going to get back on stage in 2015, so I tried to work around it instead of taking time off. Same thing with powerlifters. Mm-hmm. You know, why are you struggling with your food so much? Well, I overate after my last contest, but I need to put on muscle, but I don't want to cut right now, so I'm kind of in this limbo phase. But when the time pressure goes away from having to get on stage, all of a sudden you can have a little more clear vision of what makes sense to do. Like, oh, I'm a little overweight. Let's work on setting up a reasonable diet that's not crazy, where I can learn some new things, adopt some new habits, and we can shift to maintenance. And then I just need to set up my training in such a way that when I'm lifting weights, because it's not the only thing I'm doing if I want to do other shit, it is ideal for hypertrophy on those days when we have progressive overload built in and we can track it. Then pretty much everything else is completely based on what you enjoy, you know? And that can just be a sliding scale towards what do you like, how much of your fitness focus is going to be on bodybuilding versus other stuff. Because there's plenty of people, like, for example, if I had no desire to get on stage, and let's say I was not the Eric Helms fitness figure person I am, and be like, all right, so I want to play video games, and then I want to travel, and I want to lift weights and look jacked. Like, I would probably maintain a little leaner physique. I would probably focus on slower gains and progressive overload, and maybe 1 or 2 less days in the gym. And I wouldn't do anything else really physically except for like hiking around or traveling.
He's really good at video games.
I was. I'm not as practiced now because I have the bodybuilding focus. Trying to change the world over here. So yeah, like all of a sudden my lifestyle changes in a way that I am looking at it holistically versus a very targeted goal.
Yeah, what Bert said, I think was important to listen to, and he said you'd still have all the things you learned from this. And so I know we're talking about like what not to copy from bodybuilders, but I think one of our biggest appeals and assets that we can bring to people who come to us that aren't prepping is we help you, like Jeff always says, expand the toolbox, learn the tools in your toolbox, and that regardless, because we obviously everyone we say Gen Pop, it's like a lifter, right? So anyone who lifts, we're like, well, obviously we can give you nutritional tools that would help literally anyone who would like to look like they have muscle on their body. You know, like you said, you're gonna eat your protein. Like we don't do double-digit protein. Like we know how to track our food. We know, like we're not going to squat like idiots. Like there's some basic things that we should take. What are some other things that I'm missing that, regardless, if anyone listening to this podcast, would always be valuable that bodybuilders do?
I think there's a few. Go, Bert.
No, I made a post on Instagram a few days ago. It was Evan Godby's prep, and I'm like, he's basically doing the same thing as my mom, like right now. We got him this lean, like following a lot of the same principles, and she's doing a lot of the same stuff. It's just, the urgency, as Eric mentioned, like that's a little different. And then like we're just not. It's okay to be a little bit less consistent, you know. Because I think that's what, like, you can do really well, like being 80% on top of the details that matter. Like if you're, like, to be honest, I feel like unless I was like peeled to the bone, like most people couldn't tell the difference. Like if I was like 80% or if I like retired versus like me doing all these crazy things to make it happen. Like it's literally something that you can't notice unless you're getting up on stage. So yeah, sometimes a lot of the folks who are not competitors, like they'll turn a slight slip up into like just a huge jump because they did that one thing, for 2 days, their numbers were all over the place. They were low on their protein, and then it just kind of spirals out of control. Whereas like I see that and I'm like, man, but you can do that. Like if my buddies want to go out, for example, and like drink, like what I'm going to do is like, okay, I'll meet you at the tap-in handle, but I tell this to myself, I'm going to have to train early, so I can get that out the way. I'm gonna have a few protein feedings before I make it there, and try to keep my caloric intake like reasonable, and then I'll join them. Whereas like if that wasn't the case, it's like I would have gone my squat day in, and then I'm like, oh yeah, I can go for a few beers now, and like that would be cool as long as that's not
Absolutely
my chronic behavior.
Yeah, like the question is, how consistent do I need to be as consistent as you need to be to make progress. And that's it. Nothing more than that. While for a bodybuilder, like if you're like, the issue is never like I never look up with one of my clients 3 months into prep and go, you've made no progress. So we need to actually do the things that I told you to do 3 months ago. It's always, we're making progress, but I need you to be more consistent because we're not going to make it in time in the kind of condition you want to be. Like your 80-20 is not enough to get us there. I need it to be 95-5 if we want to get on stage looking the way you want. But that's, again, the urgency goes away completely. If you're a non-competitor, you probably would be better served long-term figuring out what's the amount of consistency and focus you need to make progress, not what's the amount of consistency and focus you need to make optimal progress, because then it ends up being an issue where you're constantly failing to meet your own goals, losing self-efficacy, developing this self-hatred, and sacrificing your social life and your sanity, which is, I think, also the issue with bodybuilders in the off-season.
Are there some things that are, I don't want to say completely black and white, but pretty damn off-white and really dark gray between someone, if I know I do not want to compete, are there some things that bodybuilders do that it's like, really, you should never do that, other than get shredded to the bone? Like,
that's the big one.
Yeah, don't.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else? That's
yeah, like I mean, if you're not following us and you're following general bodybuilders, that'd be like, taking anabolic steroids,
Yeah.
Yeah, there are definitely some things like that. Yeah, I think the swearing off of cardio is probably something that even bodybuilders don't need to do. Like, if you look at the interference literature, you have to set it up in a pretty ridiculous way to actually cause a problem. But yeah, like if you want to play basketball 2 to 3 times a week, that's probably not a good idea as a bodybuilder. But if you're not, then you just have to accept that maybe you're like going to gain muscle and your legs like 10% slower. Like, so what? You're not going to gain muscle. It's going to be 10% slower, but you're playing basketball. You're in better cardiovascular shape. You're happy. There's a lot of things that greatly outpace that.
Well, it shouldn't make you miserable. You would think, right? I mean, it should be more of an enhancement.
Yeah, nothing
all the time.
You do should be making you miserable. Exactly.
Well, but it should be more of an enhancement in your life all the time. Whereas I think we can all agree at some point in prep, you're like, this is draining the shit out of me. Like, this is draining me. But if you don't want to get on stage, that would probably not be. Like, I have friends that, like, their goal for dieting puts them into feeling like shit. I mean, Weight Watchers friends. I mean, keto friends that have no bodybuilding goals. I'm like, what? So you feel like shit? Why are you doing this diet? Like, it makes no sense.
Yeah, the question for a non-competitor is when and how much sacrifice should there be? And I think the when and how much sacrifice should be basically paid up front on when you're first developing habits. Like, if you come to the table and you decide you want to be someone who has a great physique and fitness is going to be a big part of your life, but you have really, really terrible habits, like, you go to bed at a variable time between midnight and 2 a.m. and you spend most of that time on your computer and looking at LED lights, and then you have shitty sleep and you have to wake up early for work, and you very frequently forget to eat for most of the day and then get a large pizza and crush it. Like, if you most of the time are eating out and you pretty much are sitting most of the day, and then you just start lifting weights, you're going to have some periods of sacrifice and a large scale change, and you're not going to be happy just to get to a baseline level of good habits. But then once you establish that, you should be pretty much done with any kind of hardcore sacrifice. Like, okay, now I have a bedtime. Now I cook for myself 80% of the time. And now I actually lift weights 4 times a week. And after that, it should be like pretty minor adjustments. It should be just like kind of keeping your hand on the steering wheel a little bit versus having to do a total 180 like you might have when you first got into the physical culture.
Have you guys ever seen good examples of these sort of people, like general population folks who got it right?
Yeah. I can't think of any public examples, but I can think of a lot of examples of people. Yeah.
I'm
I
trying
met
to
this
think.
girl at the gym the
Hold
other
on.
day.
Can we talk about these Cheeto fingers right quick? Is that what's going on?
That's what it is. It's my 80% day, okay?
They're so red. The spicy Cheetos? Or those hot fries?
Cheetos too.
Yeah. Some scientist is going to fix this at some point. But no, it's crazy. She is so insanely jacked. It's some girl that goes to my gym. Like, her lower half looks mutated, basically. And she's so chill about everything. Like, I've asked her every question, like, literally, like, so do you do this? Do you do that? Do you do, and like, it's kind of like, sometimes, and this is how I live. And it's like, I feel that, especially the excitement, like when you're like, okay, I'm going to be a competitive bodybuilder, the first 5 years, you're so like on that gas pedal and you're going so fast that like you tend to like fuck yourself over. And like, I look at myself in my situation, my first 4 years of training for sure, like had I taken some of this advice, I would have been a much better bodybuilder by the end of it, because I'd get hurt. It's like, I got to gain all the weight now, things like that. Whereas that person is just kind of chilling, they're cruising. Hey, they go have some beers after their squat day, but they're chill about these things. Like, they might end up in a better place than that person that's like specifically trying to specialize in bodybuilding, because again, like the thing we keep bringing up, there's no added pressure. And like, I look at that girl and I'm like, please don't ever diet. Because I asked her if she competed, and she's like, no, I have no interest. And I'm like, don't, because you have no idea how happy you are right now. And like, most people, like even people who are assumed to be like they're poster people for the sport, like they wish they had a little bit, the situation like was a little bit closer to yours.
Yeah. And what's funny too is when I'm like, anyone who just like had fun and didn't feel like they looked like shit all the time, and I'm like, oh, me until I started bodybuilding. Like my whole adolescence and early like 20s. It was like, I went to the beach all the time, didn't really care what it looked like, but I looked like half athletic because I was a cheerleader, so I lifted people. I could flip around, partied all the time. Like,
you know who's pretty good at this? Omar. I was actually just thinking that because I was hanging out with him in Toronto not too long ago.
Yeah.
Like his whole thing, he's big into just being part of the physical culture. So like he'll get somebody who like does a collab on his channel who does like strongman training or powerlifting training or bodybuilding, and his whole thing, or who wants to go do like a sprint workout, and his whole thing is he wants people to just jump in and do it. So like he's primarily kind of like a power builder, but he keeps himself generally athletic. He hangs around like a sub 15% body fat most of the time. And like he'll grab some drinks with us, but he won't get hammered. Like he'll hang out for a bit and we'll record late, but he's like, hey, it's 11. I got to get out of here pretty soon and, sleep. Like we'll be like, hey, what do you want to grab for lunch? And we'll always go to this like little like hippie food place where it's hard to get a 4-digit calorie option, stuff like that. Like that's just kind of the way he lives. And I think that is, and he's never been on the platform. He's never been on stage. So I think that's a really good example.
Until next year, maybe.
Well, he's just dieting, and I'm going to try to talk him into ruining his life. We'll see.
Sweet. Well, no, and a good example, and I'm trying to think of like who, and I can't think of anyone in my circle because I only have this circle because, as we talked about, Bert, I don't really hang out with a lot of people that aren't doing what I do. Of the people that I know that have zero off-season problems, it's like people who don't give a shit. Like my boyfriend is the best off-season bodybuilder because like after his show he's like, I'm just done counting. I'm like, oh. And that's it. Lawrence to go, same thing, right? Mm-hmm. And it's just
Brandon only does the shit he likes. He's a great example. Yeah. He just won't do it.
And he gets more and more jacked every year. And he just, and when stuff comes up.
That's often people who tend to be on the leaner, natural, skinny side of things. Like people who forget to eat.
Oh, he doesn't forget to eat. But if he like has a morning appointment, he's not hungry yet, he'll wait till it's over, be starving, and then eat too much, and then go to bed, and then whatever. Yeah,
like there's some people who that's never going to be their reality,
Me. So. I don't forget to eat.
Like I'll wake up with my wife and like we're talking and hanging out, and I know like she's just waiting to be like, so where are we getting breakfast? And
Yes, Barb.
I'm like, oh, can I force a Quest bar down? You know, like,
Yeah, I'm the same
and
way.
I do every morning because I'm dedicated. I force that Quest bar.
No,
daily
because it's
sacrifice.
not, what's it? It's not paleo and it's not raw, so you're not dedicated. Depends on who you ask.
Well, I'm not dedicated to wondering why I gas out in the middle of my walks, but yeah.
We're not making fun of CrossFitters, but because I lightweight CrossFit, we like to make fun of me, which is where this usually comes from. And then this is where all the questioning comes from on my end, listeners, is that I observe, learn, watch things from functional fitness, and then I bring it to the guys, and I'm like, okay. And then like we have these discussions about, when I was a strict bodybuilder, I thought this, and now these strict CrossFitters think this, and where do these marry in the best way that we can use it in our practice? And it's my favorite thing to do, listeners. Y'all don't hear it a lot of the time, but because I'm scared y'all all abandon me for being a CrossFitter, but it's my favorite thing to do.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest defenses to doing dumb shit that hurts you is exposing yourself to other silos of fitness. Because, like for example, when you see anytime a clique groups up and doesn't listen to anyone outside of their circle, they do dumb shit.
Yeah.
Like I think CrossFitters are in general probably some of the most athletic, well-rounded people among the barbell quote-unquote athletes. If you took an average bodybuilder, an average powerlifter, an average CrossFitter, average strongman, CrossFitter, at least if they take it seriously, is probably going to have more global athletic ability. They get into trouble because they tend to have rigid ideas about nutrition, and like while they do a lot of things, they think there's only certain ways to move. They're not quite as global as some of the more like movement focused people, like your Chip Conrad's, shout out Body Tribe.
Hey.
And likewise in bodybuilding, you run into people who are struggling with this whole, cyclical approach. I think that's probably their biggest downfall, and trying to maintain too lean of a body fat percentage. And then the people who follow powerlifters kind of idealize these three big lifts, like even when they're totally not built to lift it. Like I love following, John Hack, or like Ray Williams is my idol, and it's like, you have femurs longer than your entire body. Maybe you should be doing leg press. Like bench and deadlift, or have a big three, but it doesn't need to be the big three if that's the way you want to train, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I think that's, and so like, if you just look at how much we and our athletes in our community has benefited from looking across the aisle from bodybuilding to powerlifting, having healthier off seasons because we have a performance goal, and how much, Andrea, you benefited from looking even further into the CrossFit community and being able to be more active and stuff like that.
Well, and
I think there's examples you could find in many ways where if you're not closing your mind to the only things that exist in your community, you're probably going to have more tools on your belt, as Jeff would say.
yeah, the other thing, like Olympic lifting too, right? The like we've always really small examples, like for the listeners who are like, oh, you're telling us that CrossFit knows all the shit, but that's not what I'm saying. A small example would be like, we've always said, like in the pyramids, or like rest as long as you need to get your work done if volume accumulation is your goal, right? And that, yes, that is true. But I've found, and I had to time my lifts a lot with CrossFit-y things, right? But then because CrossFit has Olympic lifts, and I know that's the one thing I was never exposed to until a couple of years ago, is now I follow a lot of Olympic lifters, and on the minute training, which I at first thought was a CrossFit thing, it's actually a really big tool used in the Olympic weightlifting community, which is timing your rests for a lot of reasons, right? And as a bodybuilder, like we always say, to accumulate volume, but then another way I think of it is like, and Berto just talked about this in Instagram story, is like generally, the stronger you are, the bigger you'll be, if we're taking it like real general talking, right? And big lifts are important, and if you're a bodybuilder who squats and maybe fear is in your way, on the minute training is, and maybe every 3 minutes you do a set or something, but the whole point is like mentally it does a lot for me. It gets me out of my own way. I don't fear the lift. I don't rest too long. I don't look at my phone. I don't whatever. Now I only lift on time schedules. Not saying everyone should do that, and I don't program that for all my athletes, but it does a lot for me. Like if I have even heavy squats, I'm like, okay, so every 3 minutes or every fourth minute on your clock is when you're starting a set. And I just trying to throw an example out there, like no sport says this is right and no sport says it's not right, but if you're too married to one, you could be missing on the benefits of just a practice that tends to happen in this other sport that's very related. I mean, strength sport is strength sport in some ways.
Yeah.
That was long, but it's just an example.
No, but that makes sense because some of these people are looking strictly what we do.
And it's the only way.
They're looking at a Jeff. Yeah, exactly. When it's like, there might be something over here that's going to help you get to your goal.
And you don't even need to go that far. Like, for example, how everyone's like, let's make a podcast and put Eric against Mike Israel. And thinking that that's even far. Like, the Eric says to this Mike, it's like, actually, they're kind of fucking saying the same thing. That, little tweaks are different here, but I think it is good that we all really specialize to learn and get principles, like you said, Bert, like, okay, protein. No, none of these strength sports are going to tell you, actually, you should only have 20 grams of protein a day. Like, no one's going to tell you that. But if you're so married to bodybuilding and you don't want to be a bodybuilder, you could be missing out on a lot of not just useful, but fun, enjoyable, mentally stimulating things that either get you where your body wants to be or make you just, like you said, have more fun in life. Okay, I'm done talking.
No, that's good, though.
Okay.
I think I got a good idea on how we could end. Berto, I got a question for you. You've got a client who wants to be jacked as possible, but doesn't want to get on stage and wants to spend most of their life looking as good as they can. What are like the key, like foundational things you want to teach that person and that they're going to be a part of the program pretty much no matter what?
I think, so they're pretty new, we'll say, right? I think to kick things off, we'll look at what they have been doing and what they enjoy, and we'll find a way to throw that in whatever I'm going to toss at them next. So that's the first thing. And then after that, since we're talking about muscle gain, I think the first thing is to not get caught up in the whole like cyclical dieting thing. Like, we're going to try to minimize the amount of time that we dedicate to actual fat loss phases. And we're going to try to just float around here. One, because it's going to, it's a better environment for muscle growth, no doubt. But the other one is also you're going to get a little bit more used to the way you look. And I think that's huge. Like, if you're either 8% body fat or 15, like the 15 is going to feel different. But if you're always kind of 15 or somewhere around there, somewhere around Omar Isuf body fat levels, you're just, you're probably not going to flex in front of the mirror as much as like your overly neurotic bodybuilder. So I'd probably start with that. And in regards to like dosing, training, and nutritional strategies, I'm going to work a little bit below what they can handle, like consistently. So like even on a bad week, like, hey, they're 80%, and they're almost begging me for like more. It's like, can we train an extra day? Is there anything that I can start doing to like can I add a protein feeding or something like that? Like, I always want them to feel like they're on top of this and it's never really overwhelming. And if it is overwhelming and they slip off, it's like, hey, remember, dude, like it's you did all this before that. Don't focus too much on that. So yeah, I don't want to overwhelm them. That's probably the first thing.
Cool.
Yeah.
Any more like things that would probably be in place no matter what for those people? Even if it's obvious, like lifting weights and shit like that?
Oh, yeah, you can lift weights, I'd say, at least 3 times a week, 4 times if you can. I try to avoid. I feel that most people, when it comes to the average amount of volume that your typical trainee requires, like with 4 days, you can. Like it's perfect. They tend to get hurt less. There's more room for other things in life. There's more roaming off days. There's more flexibility within the working week. So there's that. And then in regards to nutrition, I'd have to find what it is that they can stick to for the longest period of time. And even if it's something that's like semi-borrowed, like I'm okay if they kind of eat, I don't know, like semi-Mediterranean or whatever. Like if that's your thing and that's a diet that you enjoy, we'll run with something that works around that. And I'd probably...
What do you mean? That? What do you mean by that? Eat semi-Mediterranean?
Like he's saying, like a diet template. Maybe they trend towards paleo. That's fine if they're getting fruits, vegetables, and protein in.
Okay. Like you're not going to make them track their macros if their diet's decently fine and they can do a food log and eat protein a couple times a day, kind of thing.
Yeah. Okay. You know, like maybe they came from a low carb background. I'm like, let's throw in some carbs. I won't make you a high carber, but let's have a little bit more. Enough to at least sustain weight training. Okay.
You're not going to turn any existing nutritional habits on their head unless they're harmful.
Absolutely. Yeah. But I guess it's just so broad because at least with us, when we get someone who doesn't want to compete, they almost want to impress you. And it's like, I can handle this, this, and that. And it's like, hold up. Like, you don't need to. Like, tell me what you enjoy and I'll do my best to make it work around that. So it's so individual, and often when we do get someone, they hear what this athlete of ours is doing, or they've seen what that athlete's doing, and they want to do that, and it's like, no, like you don't get it, like you don't have to do that. We just need to find something that gets you moving, and like even with high level bodybuilders, like when you are able to compromise certain things with them, like you just get a better final product at the end. Even though they feel like they're slowing down their rate of progress. Was there something you were fishing for there, Eric, that I missed?
No, man. I just want to get your perspective.
So what else, Bert? I'm just kidding.
Keep going. No,
I'm not fishing, but say the thing I want you to say.
I'm not saying it's a trout, but give me that trout out of the water, bro.
Well, I think what is important, or something that you didn't actually say, but is easy to catch on, I think, that coaching for Gen Pop for us is, I don't want to say more difficult, but kind of, than coaching a bodybuilder. And I was telling...
We have systems already established for if you're a bodybuilder. We know what that requires. We know how long you need to diet for. But man, if you're basically already living the lifestyle of a bodybuilder, but you don't want to get on stage, that's a very different formula for what we're going to do with you than if you started lifting 2 months ago and you're like, yeah, I finished the starting strength book. Now I want to give it a shot. Like you have no habits established. Very different system will have to develop for you.
It's difficult, like you said, because there's not I think you've hit it on the head. There's no system, right? When you say, I want to get to stage, it's like, oh, well, we know the things that get you there. When you say, I don't, okay, but if you don't, there's so many levels to don't. Like, I don't know, were you a marathoner and now you decided, you know what, I busted up my knee and now I want to be a lifter. Well, shit, that's probably a very high carbohydrate diet. That's probably a very small individual. Their form might not be all there. You probably still need to keep some running in for their sanity. Like, there's just so much shit compared to, like you said, someone who's like, I've been living life for 3 years. I just want to fine tune it and make sure I'm doing all I can or something. So, coaching becomes, I think, just as important, if not more, because it isn't so clear. And there are so many possibilities.
100%. You need someone to help you develop your individual system towards getting to your goals.
Yeah, and if you listen to this podcast, you're probably me, when I was back in the day listening to you guys on YouTube, and I hadn't flipped my switch to I want to compete in bodybuilding, I would try to live the life, and it would make, like I said, it would like Bert said, it would make me lose weight, but I wasn't as happy, lost a social life or whatever, because I'm trying to behave like a bodybuilder when I wasn't one, and then I just kept looking more and more shitty from there than when I was lifting and cheerleading. Until I actually handled it all, like you said, after the first few years. Is there anything you would want to add to that, Eric, to what Berto said, as far as other things?
I think I could just throw some science at y'all because so I think I called everyone listening a motherfucker.
Oh, okay. In the nicest way possible.
Yeah, and more like the Eddie Murphy way than actually saying that you are all having sex with your parent. So yeah, maybe to not sound like I was born in the 80s, which I was, the Samuel L. Jackson way, you know. But yeah, so what I would say is that, hey, like, some people are going, whoa, wait, if I'm going to put on muscle, I've got to be in a surplus, and then that's going to make me fat, so I have to be in a deficit, so you're crazy, I have to bulk and cut. I know I said this before, but every study ever done, especially on the untrained, where they make people lift weights and they don't control their nutrition, people put on muscle and either maintain their body fat percentage and gain weight, so they gain a little bit of fat and muscle but don't get fatter, or they roughly maintain their weight and lose body fat and gain muscle. It happens. So recomp is the natural condition, I would say. It may be something that for a bodybuilder, once they're past the intermediate stage, they need to do a little bit of force feeding to get even more muscle mass, but it's absolutely more about optimizing things versus it doesn't even work unless you're in a aggressive surplus. So I think that's one thing, you know, the gaintaining is real. And then also just for the people who are starting this journey, have higher in body fat than is healthy or makes them happy, you can absolutely put on muscle mass when you're higher in body fat and dieting. So it's more about just do what is healthy for you nutritionally. Don't try to put on weight too fast when you're already at a good body fat percentage. And don't think that you aren't allowed to diet because it's not a surplus if you're overweight to start. Just lift weights, lift progressively, move right, set your nutrition up in a healthy way, and you're going to be doing the right thing. And then to Andrea's point about people who are afraid of cardio for like the interference effect or interfering with their weight training or whatever, there's also research showing that if you're too inactive, you don't actually have a good hunger and satiety signaling going on. So if you are basically only lifting weights 3 times a week, but you're sedentary outside of that, you're probably going to be hungrier than you should to maintain an appropriate body weight. So you might want to get yourself active, even though a hardcore bodybuilder might be like, I took the elevator because the interference effect, you know. You probably want to be moderately active to some degree on every day. Like, take those ACSM guidelines seriously and do hypertrophy training, because it'll make maintaining a healthy body fat percentage even easier.
Sweet. I don't know if there's an answer to this other than the pyramids. Is there another, if I don't want to be a competitor, is there a good Gen Pop textbook, guide, person to listen to maybe any recommendations that you would have off the top of your head?
You know, I have actually heard very good things about, I think, Renaissance Periodization's guide to just general healthy eating. They're more Gen Pop nutrition book.
Yeah. And that's
not like their templates for weightlifters or powerlifters, but they're, I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head. I guess I can look it up real quick.
Is it just the Renaissance diet? Am I being crazy?
I don't think it's just the Renaissance diet.
I do think that.
But you know what? I think that's a good point, though, and like what Berto said that I needed to explain, like lightweight Mediterranean. I'm like, what does that even mean? But when you said a template, like RP, Renaissance periodization templates, I think are a really good general way to start if you care about putting on muscle, which we talked about our types of general pop do. That's a real good way to get you into some good habits, I think. Nailing a template like that, like 80%, like you said.
Yeah, I think they do a good job of taking some of the more numerical guidelines that we give and put them into actual examples.
Yeah.
Also, some really good tools for that would be like Fit Genie. If you have an iOS, if you got an iPhone.
Oh, iOS.
iOS. I don't know why I said iOS. Yeah, like. I'm old and I don't understand.
I was like, again, what did you call me?
It's the iOS. Yeah. So yeah, if you got an iPhone, that's a really cool thing because it can set up an appropriate diet based on numbers, but then give you an actual meal plan based on your preferences. But yeah, it's Understanding Healthy Eating. That's the book that I was thinking by Mike Israetel, Renaissance Periodization. Those guys. I think that from what I hear is pretty damn good for everybody.
Sweet.
Yeah, and so yeah, those are some things I would generally recommend.
So I guess we're kind of a bit all over the place, but I think because a lot of people out there do train other people, and I think we all are a little biased towards our own things. Like, for example, like I always have to remember when I'm Skyping with someone, they might not want to be like a world champion bodybuilder at some point, even like though that's my goal. So if you are going to like hire a trainer, or if you are a trainer, I think one of the best hallmarks of like I can look at a trainer like at one of my gyms, and if I've seen him with like 4 or 5 different people, and like he's doing different things with each one, like based on their actual needs, I'm like, this person understands it, like he's addressing what they need. So yeah, I guess the best bodybuilding coaches are the ones that are, that don't treat you the way they treat themselves, basically. That's super important, and something that you see very frequently happen.
Yeah, I was a pretty shitty trainer until I stopped trying to train everyone in bodybuilding. Definitely. But I think that's super common. It's like I was just at the UEBC hosted by JPS Health and Fitness. Hashtag Skepis for the win. I don't know why that's a hashtag. I just made that up right now. But
we'll start it.
Yeah. And it was really intriguing because, I asked the audience, like, how many of you are trainers? And it was a huge proportion of the audience. And it just made me realize how much, like, trainers talk to other trainers, promote information that other trainers take in. And, like, trainers are getting super, super educated, but they're not doing a great job of then translating that to their clients. I think trainers have a tough time realizing just, like, the starting point that their clients come into with their knowledge base and their expectations. And I think trainers have to realize that the language they speak and the assumptions they have when someone first comes into the gym are going to be like quite different from where you're at if you're educated. Like if you go, well, hypertrophy is probably the best goal for you to maintain muscle mass while dieting, even though your goal is fat loss. So therefore, we're probably going to need to set up, well-rounded program where we're training for progressive overload, both high loads and low loads, because both equally stimulate hypertrophy. And then we just need to set up a mild caloric restriction for you. They understood nothing of what you said, even though those seem like basic concepts to you. So I think like really just kind of checking your privilege in terms of your education, I think is really important as a trainer, so that you can actually communicate that to your clients. And like Berto said, like the best way to tell if a trainer is new and siloed off and not very good at their job is if like everyone is doing the big 3, or if everyone is making sure they like get that rear delt work in because rows and lat pull downs weren't enough. It's like, oh, bro.
Because they want to lose fat, they need to do the rear delts.
That's right. So
no, but that's a good pendulum and a good observation. Yeah, I think a lot of our people are trainers, but I think a lot the common scenarios, I want to be a bodybuilder, but I train Gen Pop. And so therefore that link is really broken because me as a trainer, I'm listening to all these other bodybuilders, but no one I train actually wants to be a bodybuilder, but I accidentally train all of them like they are. Like that's what you're talking about, right, Eric? Yeah. Yeah,
like stuff like I remember because I did a lot of personal trainer education, and some of my more bodybuilder guys were like, oh, you can turn a dumbbell upright and deadlift that? And I'm like, yeah, you can do that, man. Like, and trust me, the 45-year-old who's your client who's never lifted weights before probably can't do 135 to get to like the basic weight where you think counts as a deadlift.
That's their starting point.
Yeah, or like, yes, a goblet squat holding a dumbbell or a kettlebell upright is highly viable because once again, some people can't even squat the bar and can't hit depth or do a squat properly without butt wink with a bar on their back. So just stuff like that, so.
I remember taking like the ACE certification back in undergrad. Remember that?
I had that one.
Yeah. We had to for some classes. So my undergrad was in sports management, but you had to do like basic kinesiology classes, right? So we had to take these basic personal trainer things. And I remember finding it really interesting. And then I myself got interested in figure and bodybuilding. And so I immediately was like, everything I used to learn was trash. They told people to do 30 minutes a day. That's not enough. They're not even doing any strength work. And, like all this stuff. And then there was a good 5 years where that was like very much what I believe. Like they don't tell you to eat enough protein. They don't do it. Like everyone in general fitness is an idiot, And so bodybuilding has it right because it changed my body. So therefore it'll change everyone else's body. And then I've hit this place recently where luckily because of like I told you, my exploring in CrossFit and weightlifting, and then like strength conditioning again, that I'm like super amazed by, like high level strength conditioning coaches. Like Brandon was filming for Joe DeFranco, and I got to see some of their DVDs for like speed strength, you know? And then because I hurt my shoulder, I got super into Eric Cressy, which is actually known for his like baseball player programming. And it makes me feel like such an idiot. And like you've said before, Eric, like I want to apologize to everyone I coach between like my ages of like 19 and 24, because I couldn't see, like we can't see when we get so zoned
Absolutely.
in.
Absolutely.
I just learned to appreciate all of it, I guess, a little bit better. Don't copy.
Yeah, and even myself as a coach, like I go back to like my first few years, and I wasn't quite as flexible as I am now. Like even with like my competitors, and oddly enough, like it's only brought me better results with my athletes.
Yeah. As an athlete, do you think people need, like we're talking about this broadness, but if I'm not a trainer and I don't want to be a bodybuilder, do we need to do this stuff? Do we need to look outward so far? That's where I think it becomes like going inward, like you said, Bert. What do you like? Like, because I shouldn't have to know all this crazy shit, right, about the weightlifters and the ACE certification and the whatever. It's like my goal still is I just want to look good in the gym, or I want to look good, have fun in the gym.
I think it's just ticking boxes. Like, all right, I need a reasonably volumed full body, and I don't mean you're training full body 70% in the gym, but I'm training all my muscle groups in a progressive manner with enough volume. And then I have some type of nutrition plan that allows me to walk around at a lean-ish physique that I'm happy with. Or I'm working towards developing those habits. And that's a, under construction, work in progress relationship with food. But outside of those two things, it's like, and then do whatever the hell you want. And you have to have some pretty odd desires that to completely conflict with it. Like, I would also like to be a ultra endurance competitor. And it's like, oh, okay, that might get in the way a little bit,
But most recreational sports wouldn't. Like Bert said, if I wanted to do spin class twice a week, and I want to play basketball on Saturdays with my homies, and I want to strength train 3 days a week, like you can still be as jacked as possible.
Yep. Badminton,
checkers.
Yeah, absolutely. Competitive dart throwing at the local bar on the weekends.
Curling.
Yep. Yes, and we don't mean by bicep curls. We mean like the ice sport. Yep.
Billiards.
Billiards, absolutely.
Bowling.
Mm-hmm. Go. Yeah.
What?
It's a board game.
Oh, okay. Okay. Bert, you want to close this up? Bert, stop him.
Shoot. No, just broaden your horizons, I guess, when it comes to the way you approach your goals. Like, they don't exactly have to be the way. Oh, what's that other game? The naughty game.
Cards Against Humanity.
Yeah.
And broaden your horizons.
Yep. Competitive charades.
God damn.
So yes,
Where in the world is Carmen San Diego? All of these are options.
So you have options. You don't have to do exactly what us nut jobs are doing. So, and you still make some pretty good gains. Absolutely. And you get to have fun.
And on a final note, Wheel of Fortune.
And bingo.
Video game.
In World of Warcraft.
And Battleship.
Hey everybody, it's Eric Helms. Thanks for tuning into our podcast. As you know, at 3DMJ we promote evidence-based approaches to the lifting community. If that's something you want to dive deeper into, I'd encourage you to check out my research review, Monthly Applications in Strength Sport, or for short, MASS. This is a review that myself, Dr. Mike Zerdos, and Greg Knuckles put out every month. We cover the latest research publications that are applicable to strength and physique athletes, or anyone who's looking to get stronger or improve their body comp. Our content is in both written and video format. For more information on how to subscribe, check out 3dmusclejourney.com/mass. That's 3dmusclejourney.com/MASS for further details. Thanks for tuning in.